This is Pacifica Radio's Letters and Politics. On today's show, the late-night Jimmy Kimmel show has been indefinitely suspended by ABC after the chair of the FCC accused Jimmy Kimmel of lying about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and said that his agency has remedies to look at it. What does this mean for broadcasting and for free speech? Coming up, we'll speak to Craig Aaron, President and CEO of Free Press and Free Press Action. Then we'll talk about the stifling of free speech at the university level, as the University of California, Berkeley has handed the Trump administration a list of 160 faculty and students who have been accused of anti-Semitism in their protest for Gaza. We'll speak to Dr. Hatem Baziam, professor of Islamic law and theology at Zaytuna College and lecturer in the departments of Near Eastern and Ethnic Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. That's next on Letters and Politics. But first, the news.
For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Democratic leaders are calling for the resignation of FCC Federal Communications Chair Brendan Carr and are accusing him of bullying ABC into suspending late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. Here's Senator Chris Murphy.
Essentially saying that any media actor that doesn't say what Trump wants them to say about Charlie Kirk or Trump's policies is going to be silenced. That's censorship. That's state speech control. That's not America. Trump is making it 100% clear that he is going to ramp up his efforts to use the power of the federal government to harass and punish his critics, not because they're supporters of political violence, they are not, but because they have the audacity to openly oppose his policies. This is a standard format for every budding despot.
ABC said it was indefinitely suspending the Kimmel show just hours after FCC Chair Carr said on a podcast the network, its owner, the Walt Disney Company, and its affiliates must, quote, find ways to change conduct and take actions on Kimmel. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, he said. Unquote. In a joint statement, the leaders, including House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, said the move was part of Trump and Republicans' effort to wage a war on the First Amendment. They also vowed to investigate the suspension. They said even if it requires the unleashing of congressional subpoena power. President Donald Trump is taking aim at another left-wing organization in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. He said he plans to designate Antifa as a major terrorist organization. Antifa, short for the word anti-fascist, is an umbrella term for groups that organize against fascists and neo-Nazis. Trump made similar threats in his last administration. Writing on social media today, he called Antifa a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster. Another 4 Palestinians have starved to death in Gaza, including a child, according to health officials. It brings the starvation death toll from Israel's near blockade in Gaza to 435, including 147 children. Wafa News Agency is reporting 79 deaths in Gaza in the last 24 hours, including 9 people seeking humanitarian aid. This comes as Israel continues its ground and aerial assault of Gaza City, amounting to a demolition. It's the word Israel's finance minister used Wednesday at an event in Tel Aviv, where Bezalel Smotrich says there's a business deal for a real estate bonanza in Gaza. That's on President Donald Trump's desk now that the demolition phase is done.
There is a business plan set by the most professional people out there, and it's on President Trump's table now. And this thing turns into a real estate bonanza. I'm not kidding, it pays off. So we need to divide how we make a percentage on the land marketing later in Gaza. We've done the demolition phase, which is always the first phase of urban renewal. Now we need to build. It is much cheaper.
Bezalel Smotrich. Spain, which has sanctioned Smotrich, barring him from the country over statements he's made of Palestinians, say it will investigate human rights violations in Gaza as part of its cooperation with the International Criminal Court. The ICC has issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes in Gaza. Lawyers for Palestinian human rights advocate Mahmoud Khalil have asked a federal judge to block an immigration judge's order that he be deported to Syria or Algeria. Mahmoud is Palestinian, born in Syria. He's married to an American and has a U.S.-born children. Media reports say a September 12th order found Khalil misrepresented facts in his green card application. He was targeted for deportation by the Trump administration earlier this year and spent 3 months in a detention facility before a judge ordered his release as the case played out. He organized student protests against Israel's war in Gaza. While a student at Columbia University, his lawyers say he's not in imminent danger of deportation. The Federal Department of Justice has quietly scrubbed from its website a study showing attacks by right-wing extremists outpace those by the left. In its place, the website now says the department is reviewing its websites in accordance with recent executive orders. The study reviewed National Institute of Justice data and found right-wing attacks outnumber all other types of terrorism and domestic violent extremism in the U.S. A study was apparently removed days after the killing of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk. The study said, quote, since 1990, far-right extremists have committed far more ideologically motivated homicides than far-left or radical Islamist extremists, unquote. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s new vaccine advisory committee is set to meet for a 2-day session today to weigh the future of vaccines for COVID-19, hepatitis B, and chickenpox. Votes are expected today on hepatitis B and a combination shot for measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. The committee may reconsider the recommendation for hepatitis B vaccines at birth. Some experts are concerned about revisiting recommendations without new safety data. The committee will make COVID-19 vaccine recommendations Friday. California, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington State have announced their own vaccine recommendations ahead of the winter virus season. The move by the West Coast Health Alliance is a response to what it calls the Trump administration's chaos and politicization of science. The director of the Oregon Health Authority said our actions today affirm here public health is about protecting people, not playing politics. It comes just a day after Center for Disease Control head who was fired, Susan Monarez, warned of politicization of vaccines, warning an increase in polio could be forthcoming with an anti-vaccine administration. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.
Good day and welcome to Letters and Politics. I'm Mitch Jeserich. Today we're going to be in conversation about speech, both as ABC has indefinitely suspended the late-night Jimmy Kimmel show after the chair of the FCC had criticized the show and said that the FCC has some ways of addressing what Brandon Carr, who's the chair of the FCC, said were lies that came from Jimmy Kimmel in talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're also going to look at speech among and within universities as well as with activism. This as UC Berkeley, which is the home of the free speech movement back in the 1960s, handed a list of about 160 faculty and students to the Trump administration. These are names of people who have been accused, anyways, of anti-Semitism in their protests concerning Gaza. Joining me are two guests. First, we begin with Craig Aaron. Craig Aaron is the president and CEO of Free Press and Free Press Action. He joins us online. A very good afternoon your time, Craig.
Thanks so much for having me back, Mitch. Good to be with you.
And here in the studio is Dr. Hatem Baziam, who's a senior lecturer, Middle Eastern Languages and Culture and Asian American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. He is the author of the book, Erasing the Human, The Collapse of the Postcolonial. Hatem Baziam, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Greg, Aaron, first, your reaction to ABC suspending, likely canceling, but I guess there is a difference here between suspending and canceling. But they're indefinitely suspending the late night show, the Jimmy Kimmel Show.
Well, I think it's shocking and appalling. It is a level of government censorship and interference combined with corporate corruption and cowardice that we really haven't seen in recent memory. This is not to pretend that the mainstream media system was doing everything right or has not done a lot of incredibly harmful things, which it undoubtedly has. But at least in my lifetime, we have not seen this playbook, this incredible shakedown. Donald Trump picks out targets. His regulators go into action to squeeze those targets, to put pressure on them. And then we have the big corporations, in this case, Disney, ABC, but pushed by folks like Nexstar, the nation's largest owner of local television stations, Sinclair Broadcasting, another huge chain of television stations that is very committed to pushing MAGA propaganda, mobilizing to shut down and censor someone for, I'm not sure what exactly, for asking questions about or commenting on the exploitation of the murder of Charlie Kirk and leveraging that to, pick off targets to censor the viewpoints of somebody on ABC, but to really clearly leverage their control over mergers and acquisitions, over changing ownership rules, and to watch the corporate media really get in line, and that there isn't a line they're unwilling to cross when it comes to caving and capitulating to this administration.
Do you think that this is a violation of free speech? And I don't mean the spirit of free speech, but legally speaking, ABC does have a right to suspend or even cancel the show if it wants to, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as a private broadcaster, ABC can decide to employ whoever they want. And they can decide, depending on what their contract says, probably for any reason, they can decide to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel. But the deep concern, the free speech concern, the censorship concern is the role that the government played in making this happen. So it's the fact that, this particular incident appears to have started with the chairman of the FCC, Donald Trump's chairman, the FCC, Project 2025 co-author, Brendan Carr, going on a right-wing podcast and using that platform to go after Jimmy Kimmel, to suggest that ABC's television licenses could be taken away because of something Jimmy Kimmel said, to signal to ABC and to the local chains that there's an easy way or a hard way that they can deal with this. I mean, this is the language of mobsters, not the language of government officials. That's where the censorship concerns come in. That's where we have this massive government overreach, clearly in violation of the First Amendment and the government's role in this situation. So, yes, as a technical matter, can ABC hire who they want, fire who they want? Sure. Can the government play that role? No, that's why we have the First Amendment. We're supposed to have the First Amendment to protect this kind of government interference and overreach. And that's where we're seeing the real abuse of power here by the Trump administration. And this really unprecedented shakedown where you have the private interests, in many cases, that's Donald Trump himself, lining up with the power of the state to squeeze these corporate actors, to punish individual speakers for daring to question the official narrative, or simply, in this case, mocking the president. Mocking the president is not a crime. Some would argue, Chris Hayes said this last night, that the sign of a free society might be the ability of comedians to speak out and make fun of those in power. Now that's suddenly become a way you lose your job. Quoting Charlie Kirk before his murder, quoting what he said becomes a reason for you to lose your job. And when that's combined with government pressure, that's when we really have an ongoing free speech emergency and a real chipping away at free expression, free speech, the First Amendment, which we can connect to a lot of other simultaneous efforts, including the right to protest, including the right to speak out. So we've got, on the one hand, it doesn't mean that Jimmy Kimmel is the most important part of this story, but it does take into sharp relief how far down this path we've gone. And when we combine it with people being kidnapped off the streets for writing op-eds in support of Gaza, when we combine it with pressuring local stations for covering ICE raids and everything else, that's when we really begin to see how deep and widespread the problem is.
When you look at its entirety, Hatem Baziam, who's here in studio with me, we were just talking about that before we went on air. If you look at all of this in entirety, it's just like, where are we?
It's so overwhelming. That's partly how we can't keep track of it, because we're just every day, on Monday, it's like, oh, JD Vance is talking about The Nation magazine and using it to go after the Ford Foundation. By Wednesday, it's Jimmy Kimmel. It feels like they sued the New York Times for $15 billion somewhere in between. It really is an assault on free speech and the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think we're if we take each piece in isolation, then we're missing what is taking place. We're witnessing a corporate consolidation in the media. These major media corporate consolidation is occurring in front of our eyes. So ABC, CBS, and so on. All of this is occurring. Simultaneously, we have a technology consolidation as well, because many of these technological companies both vested in concentration of wealth, resources, and becoming an oligarchy right there in terms of the tech industry. Then you look at the university and fighting cultural wars and trying to encroach and limit the scope of academic freedom of speech, as well as looking at the protest and trying to suppress protests by arresting individuals. And then lastly, we're talking about the ICE raids, the try to scare people in the streets and really confine the scope of what is possible within our communities. So we're looking at all these pictures simultaneously, both domestically, and we need to also look at it from a transnational perspective. And I think that's the moment that we are in. We're looking at a broad changes that we are witnessing as a society, and we need to be extremely alarmed for where we are at this point.
And now the push for categorizing domestic groups as terrorist organizations.
Well, I remember when the Patriot Act actually was passed, and even before that, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act in Clinton's era, 1996, we said that initially the labeling and the framing of terrorists as being somebody abroad, if you read the text and if you read both the Patriot Act and the 1996, we could see that it's just a matter of who could be labeled as such, and then it will be a fluid development. We're seeing now the utilization of the structure, the legal infrastructure for fighting the war on terror that was beginning with the Clinton and then the Bush administration is now being deployed domestically. We see it in the UK, likewise. We see it in France. We see it in many of these places where you disagree politically with individuals and organizations that are advocating for whether it's Palestine or for the rights of migrants, the rights of individuals from Latin America, or in Europe in terms of those coming from the former colonies, right? The way for you to push them and make them untouchable in civil society is by using that tag on them that these are terrorists. So this fluid process is actually making a whole segments of our society being untouchable in society and literally neutralizing and decapitating organizations that advocate and have to work to defend the society and those who are marginalized in our society. So that's where we are. The infrastructure of the war on terror is now a domestically set up. And interestingly, that right-wing white nationalists who actually have engaged in violence are not labeled terrorists. Their organizations are not challenged or labeled as such. Immediately we use the mental health, right? Mental health is a serious issue, but white nationalists, white supremacists that have engaged in attacks are never actually given that label, and their organizations are never actually brought under this umbrella. This is not to say that we're arguing for it, because again, the infrastructure itself has to be challenged, not who is it applied to and who's not, even though we could critique that.
Craig Aaron, on the train this morning coming into work, and I was on a caffeine high, so I don't know how technically sober I was, but I did just sort of have this moment of realization, looking out the window, daydreaming of how much this feels in some ways like 9/11. When Phil Donahue was fired, when Bill Maher was fired, when newscasters all started wearing, by it seemed like they had to, these American flags, lapel pins on their jackets.
I think the echoes are there. I don't know what they say about history repeating as a tragedy or a farce, but I think we have both here. And that's scary, right? That those in power right now were so ready to exploit this murder, and to be so ready to exploit it, to abuse it, to immediately move to silence people is really shocking. I think that the speed and thoroughness with which it's happened, and just how intertwined this is. I mean, we had the vice president of the United States, who you would think had things to do, moving to host Charlie Kirk's podcast and use that as a launching pad for all these efforts, targeting individual journalists, targeting funders, targeting marginalized communities. The effort to very quickly spin and distance themselves from who this person is. You could see it in real time now that we have social media, which wasn't a thing then. When they decided that the person who killed Charlie Kirk was, they were, we're going to build us all these left-wing things. Then all of a sudden this 22-year-old white guy becomes the picture. And I've never seen them so pivot so hard. I thought we were going to lose gravity there for a second. The pivot was so quick to suddenly the soft focus profiles and things as the media kind of moved into that mode so quickly on the story, on things that aren't extended, of course, to anyone else. That doesn't change the horror of what happened, but the ability to and the willingness to exploit it in this way is yes, reminiscent and shocking. And because there are so many fewer guardrails, because we don't see the media putting up any fight, it does make it very scary to think about what they're willing to do next, and just how much they've been able to get away with in their ability, which is reminiscent, but it's this like sort of extreme sped up version where, if you pick up the wrong guy and send him to a prison somewhere else, which of course reminiscent again of that period, but it was the wrong person. There's no evidence. It's just what other charges can we go mount against them? And we've seen that again and again in the relentless assault of people just, organizing a protest on their college campus and risking being kidnapped off the street, all the way up to these, yes, very high profile figures who, we worry about less, maybe in the sense of how their lives have been upended and the very real terror they faced in terms of detention and things like that. But in the larger fear it creates, don't step out of line, don't ask too many questions. Maybe it's not worth doing that story or quoting that source or funding that group. That deep fear becomes very real. And yet we're not in the days after the destruction of towers. We're not in a full-on war footing, and yet here we are seeing them push this agenda so relentlessly.
Greg Aaron, we asked you just to join us for a few minutes, and I do want to make sure we respect your time. So let me just ask this final question to you about the chair of the FCC, Brendan Carr. Again, this is the principal author, isn't it, of the Project 2025, when the section when it comes to broadcasting is what we find in Project 2025. You know, at the time, Project 2025, when it got a lot of attention before the election, my thought was, oh, this is just another transition plan from another right-wing group. It's not that big of a deal, but lo and behold, it's been a very big deal.
It really has been the blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really been the blueprint. And, you know, when I was trying to write about this back in 2024 before the election and saying, you know, sending up the warning flares, nobody really wanted to hear about it. Then it was just, there was a sitting member of the government, because Brendan Carr was a Republican member of the FCC before he was elevated to the chairmanship. The only person currently working in the government that was a named co-author of Project 2025, and nobody was really that interested. The media decided, oh, Trump denounced it. But what we were really looking at is the blueprint. And frankly, at least when it comes to media and communications, it's been far worse. Like, you go back and look at Project 2025, and there's lots of talk about changing regulations and moving things. But the idea that an FCC chair would use this power again to extort, to shake down, that we'd see the situation where these major media companies would so easily say, well, it's worth it to us to give Donald Trump, put in his pockets $15 million to get rid of the George Stephanopoulos suit, and $16 million on completely specious charges of editing an interview on 60 Minutes. And oh, here's Amazon coming in and offering $40 million to Trump's wife for a movie that no one wants to watch. The blatant bribery of it all, the blatant criminality of it all, that wasn't in the pages of Project 2025. But, one of the great mistakes that the media made, and that, I think the Democratic Party made in the run-up here, was not taking that seriously when the people coming into power here are absolutely going back to that playbook and finding themselves, I think, able to do even worse versions, and are surprised at how little pushback they're getting. And of course, when people cave, when people capitulate, when they give in, like the leadership of Disney ABC did in this story we're talking about today, the lesson isn't that Donald Trump and Brendan Carr and all the rest go away. No, when they see people giving in and giving up, they keep coming back for more. And that's why it's just so important that people are speaking out, that they're listening to the dissident voices. The dissident voices have been warning us since the beginning of this administration about what was going to happen. And instead of standing with them, instead of standing with trans folks, instead of standing with student protesters, instead of standing with people fighting for Palestinian liberation, what we saw was people saying, oh, if we distance ourselves from those people, if we step away from them, maybe they won't come for us. That is a very, very dangerous mistake, and I hope it's one we'll stop making.
What do you think happens next concerning media? Is there something that...
Well, I'll try to be positive on a day of a lot of negativity, which is, one thing about them going after a celebrity like this is it gets a lot of people's attention. There are a lot of people that are paying attention to media consolidation. Nobody knew who Nexstar was 24 hours ago, that wasn't paying close attention to broadcasting. That's now a trending topic on every social media site. The blatant censorship here on display is getting people's attention. I mean, I was sending press releases out about this last night in a rush, and I was already getting back automated messages from television stations saying, it's not us, it's ABC headquarters, call them. That's an indication of how many people are speaking out. So I think that's on the positive side. There's a lot of people waking up. We see this in the number of people showing up to protests. If we can begin to build across movements, if we can see the attacks on individuals as attacks on all of us, I think we can begin to shift the balance. That's the good news. The bad news is they're coming for more. The guys that just bought CBS and made all these concessions and put all these right-wingers in these nanny oversight roles of the news divisions, they're coming for more. They said, oh, we love that we got CBS. Can we buy Warner Brothers too? Can we have CNN? They're going to try to get away with it. Everybody who lined up to cancel Jimmy Kimmel last night, they are doing it because they have multi-billion-dollar mergers sitting on the desk of the commissioners at the FCC right now. So they are betting that by playing along with the political attacks, by taking out one individual comedian, that's going to get them their deals done. And when they do that, they too will keep coming for more. So that's the downside here, because one of the reasons it's so easy for the Trump administration to squeeze the media is because there are so few media owners. And so if they can either make them ideological people who are on board with the project, Elon Musk and Sinclair, or just have so few of them that they have no choice but to respond when the White House or the FCC comes calling, that's what they'll try to get away with.
These mergers,
this is hopefully
just quickly,
yeah,
Craig.
ahead,
these mergers. I mean, it's important to understand these are big leverage for the government in overseeing these mergers, because it is being at least reported that all of these stations, as most broadcasters are, or at least the old school broadcasters, radio and television, are losing viewers, and they see their only way to survive is through consolidation.
Yeah, that's what they believe. I mean, obviously, from a media democracy standpoint, we need the opposite, right? Like, we need media that doesn't require 50, 60% profit margins. We need locally grounded media. We need KPFA, and we need a lot more. And that's, the larger project here, the response to this, part of it should be, if we haven't already lost our trust in corporate media, it's on full display. These are not the people that should be getting government handouts. We should be taking that money and we should be spending it on local voices, on the amazing diversity of our communities. We should be investing in local infrastructure. I think that's going to have to be non-commercial. That's not going to happen during the Trump administration, but we'd best be getting ready for a media future that looks very different and recognizes that relying on corporate media, that relying on the social media giants who are again, billionaire controlled media, very often, billionaire controlled media with seemingly Nazi sympathies, that cannot be the answer. That is anti-democratic. That is, working against this great experiment we've all been part of for all of its flaws. And so our answer has to be in investing in a different kind of media. We got to start building that now, making those connections now, because these guys have shown us they'll sell out their own employees. They'll sell out their own newsrooms. They don't care if it's 60 Minutes. They don't care if it's their most high profile evening program. They will do anything in their pursuit of greed. And for some of them, their pursuit of this Donald Trump MAGA project. So we have to meet that with a completely different kind of approach to media and a real reclaiming of these institutions, of these regulations, of the kind of people we choose and select to serve in these government roles, when there is an opportunity for that to be different people, because we see what happens when we fail to pay attention to that. We see what happens when we leave the door open to people who just don't care, who have no respect for norms, who are so willing to abuse their power. I hope we get the chance to build that next thing. First priority is defense. The second priority is getting together to begin to map out what that could look like, because it can't look like this corporate media system we've constructed, because all of the incentives, all of the options are just get bigger and then realize, well, you got to sell to somebody else to get even bigger. And that's how you end up with 7 or 8 billionaires lined up on a stage behind Donald Trump as he's getting inaugurated. And that's unfortunately the reality and the consequences that we're experiencing now.
Craig Aaron is the president and co-CEO of Free Press and Free Press Action. Craig Aaron, I know you're in demand today, sir, so I thank you for taking this time.
Anytime, Mitch. Always have time to talk to you, and really always appreciate the show and all the dimensions you explore on it. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Craig. And you are listening to Letters and Politics. I am Mitch Jeserich. We're still joined by Dr. Hatem Baziam, who is a senior lecturer in Middle Eastern languages and culture and Asian American studies at the University of California, Berkeley. We are also going to take telephone calls this hour. If you have a question or a quick comment, we ask that you keep it to about a minute and keep it respectful. The phone number is 1-800-958-9008, 1-800-958-9008. We fixed, we believe, our phone problem yesterday. Yesterday we did have some phone problems, but I think today we're good. So 1-800-958-9008. Dr. Baziam, the other thing we wanted to talk about today was the university that you are associated with, UC Berkeley. handed over a list to the Trump administration. It contains about 160 names, I think both of faculty and students who have been involved in protests concerning Gaza. They're being accused of anti-Semitism. I'm just going to admit this on air. We just assumed your name was one of the 160 because you've been on every list I've ever seen.
I'm an equal opportunity person.
But you're not on this list.
I've been facing legal investigations, 7 lawsuits, Senate investigation, also attack in the Congress and so on. So we have a whole set of other track using and deploying accusations of material support and so on. This list that's been handed is dealing with civil rights violation in relations to Title VI in particular of the Civil Rights Act. As we noticed in terms of the Trump administration, and I would say in total support and collaboration of leadership of universities, beginning with Columbia, Harvard, MIT, University of Pennsylvania, then moving to UCLA and the UC system. The weaponization of the Civil Rights Act is in particular of associating protest for the pro-Palestine, for upholding the rights of the Palestinians, for calling genocide a genocide, and the complicity of the university and government. It's actually flipping the Civil Rights Act by weaponizing pro-Israel claims of anti-Semitism in relations to the protest and moving swiftly to criminalize this and shut down the protest, academic freedom, freedom of speech, and so on. So that's what we're experiencing. So the 160 names that have been handed by the university is a complete abrogation of the role of the university as it relates to faculty, staff, and students.
The university, just to say, does say it was compelled to do it by law.
Well, that's also a big question because the university has the ability to go to court. It has the ability also to say we are conducting our own investigation. The university actually completely abrogated its responsibility to carry on its own investigation to determine whether these students, faculty, and staff have violated existing norms within the university and existing procedures. They didn't do that. They
It's
actually
not known how they even came up with these names?
Well, my estimation would be that they have possibly heard or listened to some of the complaints that are coming from pro-Israel individuals and groups. I would estimate that maybe the ADL was involved, maybe JCRC, maybe even communication with the local Israeli consulate in order to come up with this list. And as such, it's not a neutral groupings that is actually making this complaint. Now, I need to say that anti-Semitism is real. Anti-Semitism does exist. To assume that in the society that we are in, that anti-Semitism is not a challenge, it is, like Islamophobia, like anti-black racism, and so on. However, when the ADL puts its report that we have a problem with anti-Semitism, they are conflating Palestine protests, pro-Palestine statements, pro-Palestine activism, including the Palestinian headscarf, the hatta, saying that this is a symbol of anti-Semitism, or the Palestinian flag, or watermelon, or pens. This is the ADL actually almost abrogating its responsibility to point out anti-Semitism as is, in terms of animus and directive of bigotry toward the Jewish person as a Jewish person. And I may add, we talked about earlier about the Trump administration targeting George Soros. Now, I would say that the Trump administration targeting George Soros for funding many of these organizations itself is an anti-Semitic act. George Soros happened to be a Jewish person, sympathetic to some of the progressive causes. And we see this use of George Soros in the background as this mysterious figure that is funding the corruption of our society, because that's how it's being labeled. This was used in 2016, and now it's being used. Is still at the foundation is an anti-Semitic move by actually saying that all of what we're seeing in our society, whether it's pro-Palestine activism, the funding of some of the black organization, funding some of the LGBT organization, all of this, behind it is this mysterious rich figure, a classical anti-Semitism that is being pushed. The ironic thing is those who want to protect Israel and want to protect Netanyahu are actually accepting not to critique this serious anti-Semitism that is coming, because they feel that they could defend Israel's position on the university by actually engaging in this discourse. Yesterday there was a report on KCPS that there was a poll that was taken among the Jewish population, right? I have not looked at the full, but said 72% of those who responded to the poll, Jewish respondents, said that they believe that the Trump administration is weaponizing and using anti-Semitism to go after their own agenda, and in doing so, they're actually doing injustice to the fight for anti-Semitism. So I think in here, the almost 2/3 of our Jewish brothers and sisters that are looking at what is taking place understand this play, weaponization of anti-Semitism to push a right-wing both cultural wars, political wars, and to try to actually take over the university system as a university system by engaging in this heavy-handed, and unfortunately our leadership at the university is not understanding, or possibly they don't have the political backbone to actually make a full defense of academic freedom, free speech, and so on, because in here they are being caught on this. On the one hand, they want to express their support or trying to deal with anti-Semitism, but on the other hand, they are actually looking at the massive amount of funding that they come from the federal government. And I think that's where we are seeing this discourse at the university level.
In the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, they are really pushing this line. When I say they, I mean Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, I mean Fox News all day, all night. I do observe it to know what's being said. They are pushing this idea that the leftist ideology is a virus that has to be stamped out.
Well, we're talking about they're labeling anyone that disagrees with them is part of this left.
Radical left.
Radical left in terms of, and using what you can, those viruses reminds you of some of the propaganda that we saw in terms of right-wing fascist governments in the past. So literally, rather than arguing and debating the political difference, in here we're literally trying to remove a whole infrastructure of organizations, infrastructure of political, political movement that is appealing and looking at our society from a different lens. So by using this, literally the Trump administration, those within the right wing that has been at work for almost 30 to 40 years, are seeing this moment to capture all parts of the society and direct society in their way. Some of the most cronyist type of political, economic decision-making that we are witnessing in front of our eyes.
I think of Martin Niemöller's famous lines, and Martin Niemöller's a really interesting figure, actually. We've done shows on him himself. He was fighting communists early on and was with the fascists, but later he would become famous for saying, first they came for the communists, and I said nothing. Then they came for the trade unions. I said nothing. Then they came for the Jews. I said nothing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in that sort of trajectory that the protesters for Gaza or first they came for
absolutely.
these protesters?
Think the Gaza protest exposed the big ravine within our own society. In the initial, and even up to this point, the Democratic Party has not stepped out to defend the protesters, one, and to also take a position. So they actually were part of the problem. Biden was part of the problem. And the agreement with the University of California, actually begins with the Biden administration and was taken into its natural conclusion by the Trump administration. So the Gaza protest was an acceptable sacrifice, right, to be taken. There was no defense from Biden administration about the protests in the universities. Kamala Harris, I think he committed a disastrous campaign by not actually saying anything and indicating in any way that she supports the protesters. Even she might disagree with them, she supports them. There was no defense whatsoever. And as a result, sacrificing the students across the universities, across the academic arena, made it possible for the Trump administration to come and build upon it. And we're still in here. Again, just notice we're in Berkeley, right? Yeah. Berkeley supposedly is the most progressive city. Supposedly, I'm not agreeing with this.
The bar's not high.
Yeah, the city council in the city of Berkeley have not yet got on record of actually voting on a resolution for calling for ceasefire or actually accepting the scholars of genocide that this is a determination of genocide taking place. So this is the city that supposedly was in the forefront during the free speech movement, forefront in the anti-apartheid movement, Vietnam War, and so on. When it came to Gaza, to Palestine, they actually lined up almost on the same side or on the same type of arguments that you see the Trump administration. And that's where we actually say that Gaza exposed this ravine, and we need to understand you need to defend Gaza in order for you to actually be able to make a principled ethical position vis-a-vis academic freedom, free speech, critiquing the media consolidation, critiquing the tech industry that has become an instrument of the technological war that is being fought over Gaza with surveillance, with the use of technology, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft using their system or Google. All of this is actually putting in front of our eyes a critique, a profound critique of our corporate, our political, our social, our academic infrastructure. And I think that's why Gaza is so important at this point. Not to say there isn't any other conflict, because I see some of the billboards that are put up say, why you're silent on Sudan. We're not silent on Sudan. We actually been speaking on Sudan. You were silent on Sudan because you did not want to argue. And now, because you want to protect Israel, you bring Sudan into the discussion. We were not silent on Congo. We continue to actually speak on the Congo. We critique the policies in the Congo. We critique U.S. policy in Latin America and Central America. We critique the continued raw material extraction from the global south. But now people who want to direct or to shift the discussion away from critique of what is taking place in Gaza, which is a genocide like in Sudan and so on, they want to actually almost engage in a divide and conquer tactic or a diversionary tactic in order for us not to have this profound critique at this moment.
Let's go to our phones, and we're going to begin in Sacramento, where we're joined by Darian. Good morning, Darian. You are on the air with Dr. Hatem Baziam.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much for taking my call and for hosting excellent programs day after day. It's so valuable. I wanted to comment that I believe people may more than ever now appreciate the importance of civics in our public schools. Unfortunately, for probably the last 15 to 20 years, if not longer, civics has been cut out of the high school curriculum so that U.S. activists may not know where they have the opportunity to intervene, to pressure, to influence the federal government. And I think this is a serious problem. Thank you.
All right, Darian, I appreciate your call. I'm going to go to a next caller because we get into these a little bit late and our lines are full, and I want to get as many people as I can. We can come back to that if you like, Dr. Baziam. Mm-hmm. Let's go to Portland, though, where we're joined by Elliot. Good morning, Elliot. Hello, Elliot. Well, we lost Elliot, so let's next go to Glendale, down in Southern California. Carlos. Good morning, Carlos. You're on the air.
Morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for
we got
having
you,
me
Carlos.
on.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. To the conversation about how the media is caving so easily, this tells me, and I'm sure others have noticed it, that whenever there is a corporate profit involved, democracy loses. So from my point of view, capitalism is a real problem, and nobody seems to really talk about it. We talk around it, and we talk about it, and we talk about how it influences us, and it's damaging to a great number of us. But nobody realizes or doesn't seem to really just point the finger directly at the entire system of capitalism. It's got the entire world in its grip, and it's going towards fascism on top of that. So that was my comment, basically. That's it.
All right, Carlos, appreciate that. I'm going to go to one more call, and we're going to go to Berkeley, where we're joined by Eid. Good morning, Eid. You're on the air.
Through Mario Savio, at the time, the demonstration against Vietnam, I lived in a beautiful time. Now the city of Berkeley has the worst ever reactionary city council. And, the new mayor, I don't know, but the old mayor, again, was horrible. But what I like to say, I like to explain, everybody please listen to me. The word Semitic is a linguistic term. It refers to languages, Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, and even Amharic, Ethiopian language, have nothing to do with race. And to mix anti-genocide with anti-Semitic is shame on all of us. The blood of all of us kids and women and men in Gaza. I never want to live long enough. I lived in Berkeley for 62 years to see this horrible, horrible blood. And the final loser, by the way, is going to be Israel itself. It has written its history off. By the way, I met Dr. Hatem many years ago in my business in Berkeley. He's a very good man. Everybody listen. Again, Semitic is a linguistic term. It's not racial. Shame on my University of California. I spent 14 years there as a professor and a grad student. Shame on you to have done what you've done.
All righty, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, Hatem, before we go to another call, any comments on the calls you've heard so far?
Well, I think civic education is so critical. You would need to have an educated population informed in order to make decisions that pertain to its life and the world. And we are living in an empire that is actually structured at making people less and less knowledgeable, less and less able to have critical thinking in order to make decisions. The fact that we are at $1 trillion of military budget while we shut down the Department of Education is all the information you need to know of where we are as a society. So I agree in terms of the need for us to have an education that centers this decision-making and ability for us to make informed decision. As far as capitalism, crony capitalism, I will actually agree that we have to have a profound critique of capitalism. I agree with Martin Luther King famous speech, The Three Evils of Society. He said it's materialism, / in terms of capitalism, racism, and militarism. And these three are still at the hub of where we are as a society. They're literally in terms of the concentration. 2016, there were 84 men that had more wealth than 50% of the population. Now, 8 men have more wealth than 50% of population. Just last week, Larry Ellison, wealth increased by $100 billion in one day, right? And he became the richest man in the world. And that's why, at least just even before that, he was purchasing CBS. And now his son is actually at the helm of this conglomerate. So a critique of capitalism is very important. As the last question about the origin of the term Semitic is actually, it's correct to say a Semitic person is a person who speaks one of the languages that were identified as part of this definition of Semitic language. However, we need to at least understand that the Jewish person has been racialized, right, throughout a long history. And we could go back to Europe in relations to the history of anti-Semitism and how Europeans even the term Europeans, we could challenge him, the expulsion of Muslims and Jews from Europe, and even before that during the Crusades where pogroms and attacks on Jews and Muslims occurred, the construction of this internal other and external other has been part and parcel of European discourse. Even the question of creating a Jewish state, which is Israel, came out of the deep anti-Semitism that is in Europe. And what is insulting for me is that today we speak of Judeo-Christian tradition. And actually, I need to ask the question, where is this Judeo-Christian tradition? Because this is just a modern development. Because if you trace about 1,000 to 1,400 or 1,500 years, if not more, there is actually pogroms, death, genocide, complete attempt to eliminate the Jewish person, and even in the modern period, the ghettos that were set up in Europe. Actually, we need to speak of the Judeo-Islamic tradition, the history of Jewish-Islamic relations that are actually far more extensive, far more in deep. So in here, the discourse around anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and so on has to be understood both historically and its in contemporary manifestation in order for us not to fall victim to the strategy that is being deployed, which also is founded upon divide and conquer. I do think that at the core of it, Jews, Muslims, Arab, Palestinians need to imagine and understand a different history, both by looking back at the past to rethink how history has been put forth, and to imagine a different world that does not center on Zionism, on the construction of a settler colonial state and genocide. And I think that's where some of the heavy work needs to be undertaken.
Let's go to one last caller, Joseph in Berkeley. Good morning, Joseph. We're towards the end of the hour, so we'll have to keep you to that minute, but you will get the minute.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we have a Reichstag fire event. YouTube removed a quote by a Reverend John Wesley, and he said about Charlie Kirk, how Kirk died does not redeem how he lived. I want to say, without putting Professor Baziam on the spot, that the release of this 150 names by UC Berkeley says that we need a new free speech movement at the university, and we need to shut down the university, or there will not be a university worthy of the name. We will not have a society worthy of the name, and thus a university degree won't matter anyway. So at this point, any student who thinks they can just try to keep their heads down and maybe they'll get by this Nazi-esque turn of American society will be wrong, as eventually all of us will be ensnared in this Nazi-esque regime. Thank you.
All right, Joseph, thank you very much. Dr. Baziam, we're down to our final 90 seconds.
Well, I totally agree that we do need a new free speech movement. I happen to have known Mario Savio. I have happened to organize with Mario Savio during Proposition 209. I hosted him a few times at the time where we were organizing against the elimination of affirmative action. The university is good at commodifying the free speech movement, but not at the actually having the principle of the free speech movement and what's articulation. I think the free speech movement archive, they sent out a very profound statement, important statement, and I do think that we need to reclaim free speech. We need to reclaim academic freedom and not allow the corporatization and the fact that we have a large amount of grants that are shaping the discourse. That's where some of the work that needs to be done.
Do you think the left maybe wasn't as sensitive to issues of speech over the last 4 years?
I think they adopted cancel culture themselves as a reaction to some of the right-wing, not understanding that limiting. Again, also, we need to understand that free speech, taunting is not free speech. I cannot come and taunt you in your face and think that I am engaging in a political discourse. So when a Nazi is walking down and having a march and taunting black brothers and sisters and so on, that is not free speech. That is taunting and attempting to eliminate the individual and so on. Even though we need the Supreme Court have said that we are living in a market of ideas, that was actually in defense of right-wing neo-Nazis at the time protesting. So we need to understand the history and not to actually have it. We need to defend free speech. We need to be cognizant of the dynamics and to engage in more debate, where debate has to actually open the vista for ideas rather than actually taunting and demonizing the other.
Dr. Hatem Baziam, Senior Lecturer in Middle Eastern Languages and Culture and Asian American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. He's the author of many books, including Erasing the Human, The Collapse of the Postcolonial. Dr. Baziam, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And that does it for Letters and Politics. The show is produced by Deanna Martinez. Kirsten Thomas is the engineer. I'm Mitch Jeserich, and I thank you for listening.
KPFA listeners, stay ready so we don't have to get ready. And the best way to stay ready? Become a monthly sustainer. When truth is under attack, when rights are on the line, when mainstream media is asleep at the wheel, you show up. You keep KPFA going strong. You keep the signal alive. You remind us why independent, people-powered radio still matters. And right now, we need that energy, that readiness, that love. So let's make it official. Head to kpfa.org and sign up to become a monthly sustainer. Because staying ready means standing together. And KPFA is standing with you.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online everywhere at kpfa.org.